This is Changeling the podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the podcast. Come for the glamour, stay for the vibes. I'm your host Josh, and with us is your other host Pooka. Say hi, Pooka.
No, shan't.
Oh no. What are we talking about today, Pooka?
We're certainly not going to be talking about the best Kithbook that was ever written, Kithbook Pooka.
That was a good use of negatives. I think that still falls into Pooka-ese rules. It's good.
I try to do like the nesting negatives, but
Yeah.
I should have planned this in advance, is what I'm saying.
That's what you want us to think, right?
Yeah.
So yes, Kithbook Pooka. So this is written by Angel McCoy and developed was Nikki Ria and Jackie Caseta. And I looked it up, and Angel McCoy did not seem to do any work for Werewolf the Apocalypse. So I'm extra confused by this book, but we'll get to that. And yeah.
The fervor is nonetheless there
Mm-hmm.
for Werewolf.
Yes.
And the art houseness is, I think, still kind of visible here. You have the cost-saving measures of black and white printing joined by large margins and fairly large text and lots of white space. Only two artists with quite spare art. So.
Mm-hmm. And they pick different fonts now that are hard to read.
It is also, it's longer than the previous Kithbooks. This is the first one we get in the not exactly revised era because it was still second edition, but I feel like it has the same amount of text as the previous ones. It's just kind of stretched.
Yeah, that's extra weird then. Why would you save money?
And most of that text, the direction it takes the Kith, it's really something, isn't it?
I don't think it's the worst Kithbook we've done.
I can't tell if you're Pooka-ing or not.
No, I think this is more useful than Kithbook Trolls, but we'll get to it.
Okay. And maybe it's some kind of meta commentary, like, through the fourth wall, like tricking the readership, saying, oh, you thought you were going to get a standard Kithbook, but instead you're going to get this mishmash of somewhat useful with complete head-scratching material.
I mean, somewhat useful with complete head-scratching material. Not unheard of in Changeling supplements, but...
Yeah. I'd like to, before we dive right in, I'd like to preface by saying there were a couple comments on the Discord to the effect of, oh, can you record this entire episode in Pooka-ese? I'm glad that our listeners have such faith in the amount of time and energy that we have for preparation and or our improvisational skills. However, I think it would suffice. In my notes, I've at least flagged a couple parts that I think qualify as Pooka-ese, so I will shout those out. But otherwise, I think it's going to be the usual.
Oh, the history chapter? Please tell me it's the history chapter.
There is a bunch in the history chapter.
And the mechanics. That also should have... I think that was in Pooka-ese.
And this is just beyond the garden variety Pooka-ese stuff. This is like deep cut dialects that I'm looking for. Anyway.
So yeah, it starts out with Lion and the Heart of Wonder, a Pooka parable. Okay, if we rated every single Changeling book by the intro fictioners would have it, this might be on the bottom for me.
Oh no.
Did you like it?
I thought it was cute. I mean, it was occasionally amusing. It didn't tell me anything really about the Kith, except that if this is a tale that they share among themselves, I'm like, all right, that's fine.
Yeah, they're associated with animals. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah. It doesn't fall into the pattern that we've seen with other Kith books where it's kind of an explanation of their frailty and or birthrights. We do get the note at the end, this was the first lie Pooka ever told, but like nothing in the story actually leads up to that.
No, in fact, one of the big points is they're the only ones that keep their words out of all the Kith.
It's true. But I think that speaks to a misconception about the Pooka, which is that they can't make promises or take oaths or do anything like that. And in fact, they can. And as this Kith book suggests, they actually take them even more seriously than a lot of others because of their frailty. But I don't think the fable, I think fable is the right word here. It's kind of a combination fable about how the lion got to be king of the animals with a classic riddle, parable, hero's journey kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is weirdly earnestly sappy for an origin story, so yeah, I don't really know what to make of that, but
I got a bit of environmental like Captain Planet level environmental.
Oh, well, that too will be a theme that we see returns to. But yeah.
So yeah, and then we have a picture, at least on my PDF, is almost unviewable. It's this pencil sketch that's like more sketch than pencil.
Yeah.
I think somebody's hitting somebody, maybe.
Well, and this is Melissa Uran's art, and
Mm-hmm.
she's done a lot of, I guess, almost manga inspired kind of fight
Yeah.
scene
Oh,
art.
she did a ton of Exalted for a while.
Yeah.
But that was like full color, and you could actually see it. Some of it was good and some of it was questionable, but you could at least see what she was drawing. This is like, I don't know how it looks on you have a physical copy, but
It's not much better in the physical.
no, it's the first pencil sketch without really inked. Like that's how it looks. So
I wonder if the art house budget, they were like, so listen, we have enough for you to commission work from a artist, and then maybe why don't you ask another artist for some of their sketchbook pieces?
oh yeah, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with Puka either, but maybe it does. It's hard to tell.
There's a vaguely animalish figure.
Maybe both figures. Who knows?
Maybe both. Yeah.
So, chapter 1 evolution. And I just want to say the font for headings and stuff, it's I've not seen before, and it's readable. So that's a plus of some other fonts that you see in Changeling things, including later. But that's weird. It's like blocky Comic Sans ish, but not quite. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's the history of the Puka.
There's a difference here, again, from previous Kithbooks, where rather than starting from like a place of deep legend to explain their origin and then having that take up half to 2/3 of the history chapter and basically everything pre-shattering, this one is actually more pegged to the human timeline.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of akin to, at the time, like vampire revised clan books were coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and those tended to have these really expansive history sections. So I wonder if some of that design philosophy bled in.
It also really cleaves a lot closer to paleontology and stuff
Yeah,
than some of the stuff that I'm not sure if that's accurate. A few things, but it's also the '90s, and
yeah. And certainly there's opinions in this presentation
yeah,
of history.
and there's little sidebars, big sidebars from like she going,
Yes, much pearl clutching about how unreliable this Pooka narrator is.
yep,
But this brings me to calling out an example of Pooka-ese. Earnest academic bullshitting is a time-honored
mm,
tradition, and I fully think that should qualify as a form of Pooka-ese. Like, I remember being in graduate school and somebody telling me that one of the most valuable skills you learn in graduate school is when somebody says, "Oh, have you read X or heard of X?" is to go, "Oh, yeah," and just kind of nod and squint and tilt your head a little
mhm.
bit, and they'll believe you. So I take a lot of this chapter on faith as a result of that.
Like the stuff about how they were the gods of Egypt, and then
For example,
yeah, and then I think they actually mixed up one of the pharaohs with his dad in bits and sort of combined them.
and I guess they felt they could and had to do this because satyrs already claimed the Greek pantheon. So
Yeah, it's like, oh, they have animal heads. Let's make them Puka.
yeah,
There's a lot of that here. It's like, oh, part animal, part human must be Puka, which is extra funny because like the first being they think was a Puka is this describing the fear book from
to be fair, this was before Denizens came out.
yeah, but it was just extra.
So yeah, you have prehistoric Puka being rather more predatory, fearsome, and awe-inspiring.
Hmm.
I'm imagining saber-toothed tiger and cave bear Puka. Not sure we need a Sumerian connection like we get in here, but yeah.
Mm.
But this book also, even though we're now solidly into second edition, this from the get-go is so like progress is bad, humans are awful, technology destroys everything, and it's just fully committed to that point of view.
Yeah.
And whether or not one agrees with that, that is a choice that has been made for the direction of this kith. And I think
Hmm.
it's, well, I have thoughts.
Well, it's not just they put that in, but it's also according to this chapter, that's all the Puka are. They're the animal people.
Yeah.
And there's definitely more to Puka than that. Like, there's nothing about, I don't know, like any sort of trickster archetype or
Hmm.
being a confidant or anything that's associated besides you're part animal and you're part. It's like this is the story of the Farah from Werewolf the Apocalypse, not Puka.
Yeah. They're animal shape changers filled with rage about the destruction of the natural world ever since humans started settling in cities and cultivating the fields. Sounds familiar.
Mhm.
Another piece of Pooka-ese, there's some speculative etymology here about the word Pooka, where it says it's a Gaelic corruption of the word for changing fae that originated in Arcadia. I don't think we need all of these asides about religions. Like, we get the
Mhm.
Scythians, and we get Australia, and we get the Celts. And I don't know, I see it as an attempt to suggest that all of the other animal human shape changes worldwide are variations of Puka, maybe to kind of push back against the pointed out Eurocentrism of the game. But I'm like, why don't you just turn it around and say Puka are a European, and in particular Celtic strain of shape changer fae? Like,
Mhm.
it would not be that hard to.
Mhm.
Then we get to endangered species. There's like an evolution. I mean, the chapter is called Evolution, but then that becomes a theme because you have like a quote from Charles Darwin, and now we're talking about endangered species and the sundering. It opens with a rainforest proverb: in the jungle, animals know everything. I don't know what rainforest proverb is supposed to mean.
Which
Like,
rainforest?
right.
I'm gonna assume it's like basically people outside of Vancouver talking about this.
I think it's another form of Pooka-ese myself.
Yep.
So they've repeatedly positioned the Puka as gods, maybe as like a fig leaf to distinguish them from Farah. This section in particular, this is where I have in my notes, but how did they get confidant as their birthright? Because so much of their early history described here is like they're against civilization and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
It would have been more interesting to me if this, quote, evolution was presented by some or from a certain perspective as more of a domestication, but we don't see that perspective.
Mhm. Oh, there's lots of ways I think this could have been done better, but yeah, we get more like Puka around the world. They're not like they're Kithane. They're not Nunahi or whatever. Or
We get a whole section here on the Americas, and it's like, why was this needed? Why did you have to say that they inspired Mesoamerican mythology? That was not at all necessary.
well, they also inspired Egyptian mythology and earlier something to do with the dream times in Australia. So I mean,
Yeah. Well, in particular, that a tall, fair skinned, and bearded Mesoamerican god was actually a puka fleeing from the sundering in Europe. And I'm like, ah! So,
they get worse on that. Let's get to shattering.
yeah. And now we're back to the usual Kithbook history method of zooming through thousands of years of history in
Yeah.
like a paragraph.
They add a new thing which was brought up in this Kith book, never mentioned before, never mentioned again, of the dream burrows, but not just dream burrows. The idea is after the shattering, most of the puka left to hide in the dreaming in little burrows, especially the ones from animals that wouldn't hang around humans. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. So I did do a triple take when I was looking at this, and I went back and read a little bit more carefully, and I think it's not quite as dramatic as that because the Dream Burrows sidebar here, and I will say, I think the idea of Dream Burrows is actually
Hmm.
really cool and interesting, and I wish we had more concrete information about them. But it specifies that it was really during the Industrial Revolution that the Puka started to flee en masse. They couldn't flee to Arcadia because the gates were shut, so they found some way of nestling into, I guess, the nearest part of the near dreaming
Yeah.
from the Industrial Revolution until the Resurgence, at least in the sidebar. That's what it says.
Yep.
So they weren't gone for the entire 600 years. They were still gone for 150
Hmm.
or thereabouts. And yeah, I find that peculiar.
Yeah, but it also says in the regular paragraph that this happened instead of the changeling way, many flee to the dreaming.
Well, sure. Well,
Yeah.
that's what a lot of kids did.
Yeah. It's been said, sort of, but not really. And anyway, I'd like to know more about all sorts of Kith that didn't make it to Arcadia, but didn't
Yes.
stay on Earth either with the shattering. So
Those are the ones in the home realms out in the far dreaming. There's also the realm of Balloon, and like, we have other
yeah,
sort of Puka kingdoms out in the
but it
dreaming.
never actually said that's what they are.
Yeah,
Or mechanics for what happens when they try to come to the odd world. But
yeah.
anyway,
There's a paragraph here about the advance of, quote, civilization in the Americas, and it is really gross.
mm,
The author's heart was in the right place. I'm made uncomfortable by some of the language choices in this paragraph.
Some of it's, oh, this is 1999, but
Yeah. So then the extinction section, we get the years of suffering, which is the Industrial Revolution.
mm-hmm.
Pooka don't like technology, according to this book. Groundhog Day, I don't really understand. Like,
Yeah, why is it called Groundhog Day? I think they're just trying to find animal references. But then it's like, I think the Pooka liked the Vietnam War, according to this, or the protests on the Vietnam War.
yeah,
The Pooka are now a force for democracy. Okay, and then the resurgence happens.
overall, it's like this whole history section, it's this mishmash of assertions full of repetitions and non sequiturs, and therefore qualifies as Pooka-ese.
Mm-hmm. It also contradicts itself a bunch of times.
Yeah. But it remains vociferously anti technology, and
Mm-hmm.
the Pooka here seem way more resentful and selfish of their lost power in this telling.
They just read like werewolves and stuff. Like it's not
Yeah. If you've played Werewolf the Apocalypse, then that's this book.
not the whole book, just well certainly this chapter.
No, it's the whole book, I would say.
Mm.
So the resurgence flooded the dream burrows with glamour and pushed some of the Pooka hiding out there into bedlam, leading to wars in those little dream realms. And then the slain ones reincarnated over the course of the next several decades. But at the time of the writing, it had only been 3 decades.
Mm-hmm. And then it gets the chords were a bit. It starts to read like a bit like Fool's Luck.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a sidebar on Frederick the Brave, who's the most famous Pooka spy for some reason. And then the suggestion that the Pooka exercised their rage from the beginning of time.
It's a mouse Pooka that clung onto little dresses and stuff. That's great.
Yeah, well, they were handy for being spies and couriers. And
Yeah, that's cool. But it's like more Pooka-ese. Let's go with that for this.
Yeah. I like the idea of a Pooka spy in the Accordance War, but what the hell is this section on Martin Longclaw? That's like he was the delegate to High King David's peace settlement.
Yeah, just felt like another piece out of Fool's Luck, where they're like, oh, he's worried he's going to get killed with the iron knives and stuff, and then he's surprised, and then he's like starts siding with High King David.
Yeah, but this is longer than the entire section on the Shattering and the Interregnum put together. It's like,
yeah.
Maybe this was somebody's beloved character or something.
Yeah, this felt like it should have been into Kithbook Trolls. That could have.
Yeah. And then there's this art of a really freaked out horse.
Mm-hmm. There's a man's head growing out of the horse.
There's mention of the current meta plot where High King David has disappeared. It remains to be seen which side the Pooka choose to support. Some advocate joining the Shadow Court. Others say the Celia are the only real friends. I don't like assertions that a Kith kind of operates as this monolithic unit. And I kind of felt like the previous Kith books moved away from that.
Yeah, this reminded me more of like a vampire.
Yeah, like an old vampire clan.
It's like the gang roll thing for Revised when they all, the completely independent clan that has nothing to do with each other, all en masse left the Camarilla.
Yeah, which it just doesn't work for Changeling. Particularly with the Pooka, because they are, I would say, one of the Kiths that has the most diversity in their number in terms of personality and inclination. So, but exotic Pooka are back now. Yay, thanks, Resurgence. So this chapter has repeatedly told me that the Pooka are proud and angry. They're filled with rage and sadness about the continuing progress of technology. They've had to adapt or die. Very Werewolf. But it's told me nothing about why or how they feel these things or who they are. I guess I'm supposed to accept that it naturally follows that a Kith that turns into animals would naturally be the sort of like steadfast preservers of the natural world.
Yeah. Who lie all the time.
Who lie all the time and are friendly.
Are very confidant.
Yeah, like, so there is this full page sidebar on a few of the specific dream burrows that are out there. We get the forest beyond forever, where there are these bedlam packs of wild Pooka roaming around. The depths that are a complex conglomeration of caverns with subterranean Pooka.
Yep.
And then Silver Valley, which I thought actually sounded like a really good setting for a story. So I'm kind of scratching my head about it a little, but...
Forests, they all fight each other. Depths, they kind of keep to their own, but there's like an uneasy peace. And in Silver Valley, they all like live in kind of a oppressive republic that's all about keeping the peace.
It's like mob rule Arcadia.
Yeah.
But that's like, as a setting, I'd be like, oh, that's so cool to
Yep.
send a motley into and see what happens. Again, we don't really get any mechanics for these, but they're hidey holes in the near dreaming that the Pooka were able to dig.
Mhm.
Basically, they're dream realms. And then chapter 2.
Diversity.
Yeah, what is this picture?
I think it might have looked good if it was actually finished.
Pooka being threatened. Yeah,
Or maybe threatening someone? I think that's a Pooka strangling somebody.
there are threats in progress.
Yeah.
I do like the implication early in this chapter that changing physical form, because a Pooka, when they turn into an animal, it's not just their fey mien that changes, it is their actual fleshy bit. That entailing considerable power to just be able to shapeshift like that. I kind of like that. I like that idea.
Is this the part that also says that, oh, their mundane possessions and even some of their treasures and stuff don't shift with them?
Correct.
Also new to this book and made me think werewolf.
It's new to this book, but I don't know that previous books ever spelled that out. Like, I don't think previous books ever said one way or the other whether or not they leave everything behind when they change.
Mm.
There's notes about how no two are exactly alike. There's a survival of the fittest aspect in the dream burrows, at least. And there's some considerations that exotic Pooka in particular have to take, such as they might not be able to change into their animal form in a given environment.
Yeah, like, so it's kind of common sense, but it's useful to think about.
Yeah.
Anything. Like, if you have a penguin Pooka in your Seattle game, there's some things to work out there that's different from a squirrel Pooka in your Seattle game.
Yeah. You can have one, but
Mm-hmm.
what I don't like about the first part of this chapter is the repeated insistence that they've only been back for 30 years. The lack of information on uncommon Pooka. Like, we get common household Pooka quite a bit, exotic and insect Pooka a fair amount, and then uncommon Pooka get like 5 sentences.
Oh, I guess the squirrels are uncommon Pooka. Never mind. So.
Well, because they're not house pets, which seems like a weird distinction. And it also suggests that squirrel Pooka were gone for 200 years and then came back in the 60s. I'm like, they were probably fine.
Yes.
So
the raccoon Pooka of at least the ones. I mean, I guess the fur trader. They wouldn't like the fur trading part, but like by the time cities started popping up, colonial stuff, they would have been fine.
Well, that's what's frustrating, is that in addition to not having domestication as a possible perspective on their evolution, there's also really nothing about adaptation.
Squirrel are also under common household Pooka, but they're also explicitly under uncommon Pooka. There we go.
Yeah, it's just... So then we get Nature's Call, a Pooka primer. They talk about rebirth. All Pooka reincarnate in human bodies, not animals, and their animal affinity sort of informs who they are in a metaphysical sense.
Mm-hmm.
Human body begins to acquire features that relate directly to the appropriate animal. There's some old Italian folklore surrounding that, which I've always thought was kind of funny.
But... yeah, this is one of the parts I like from this book. Chrysalis, it'd be kind of weird to shunly shapeshift in your chrysalis and dream dance and stuff. That's not good. That's not pleasant.
And the chrysalis and shapeshifting part, it's the first change for the Garou. It's exactly that. Maybe not always as bloody as a werewolf first change tends to be, but the rest of it reads exactly like a first change.
Yeah. Although that bit, I think, makes a bit more sense.
I suppose, yeah. We get some advice to the storyteller on character creation and the uniqueness of each Pooka's animal affinity. This is followed by some trait-specific advice on things like physical, social, and mental attributes, abilities, and cantrips. I found all of this completely the most useful thing I've ever seen in a book. No, sorry, the opposite. The other one.
Yeah. I was a bit surprised there. I'm like, if I thought it wasn't just pulled out of someone's butt, it reads that way. And I'm like, also, you talked earlier about a mouse Pooka getting squished easily. I'm like, but it explicitly under the rules here, that can't happen.
Yeah. Anyway. These 2 pages boil down to do what you want.
Yep.
By the way, if you're a mouse, you can get 10 dots of stealth, apparently. And do hopscotch by chasing your tail as a bunk. I do actually like the venom rules. I think that's fine. So if you have a venom attack, you get 4 venom damage dice added to your attack. And then every half hour of in-game time, you roll again. You roll 3 dice, then 2, then 1. So it just kind of keeps doing damage, but reducing each time.
Yeah, it's definitely some of the better venom rules in Storyteller system I've seen before.
Yeah. And then the Guide to Affinities.
I don't think you should spend freebie points
Nope.
to play rare things.
Yep.
No, don't use that. You could maybe just say, hey, these are more common and these are less common. Okay, whatever. It's like setting info, but like, don't use these rules, please. Like, don't use the bit about having to spend to get this.
I do think a functional system of some kind would be helpful. This is not it. So,
No, and it's just paying freebie points for rarity, which is not how freebie points what they normally pay for in your Changeling game. So,
rarity relative to the Americas and Europe in particular.
oh yeah,
/ the rare or more endangered it is. Pay freebies. It also suggests that these affinities are more or less fungible, and they're not. Like, a kiwi would cost more freebie points than an elephant. I'm like, maybe the kiwi has some kind of powerful magic that I don't know about, but there's also, given how little we learn about how aquatic puka manage, we get an awful lot of fish here.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the blue whale.
Well, it's not strictly rarity either, because like not just America. Like, there's no place where this rarity actually works. Like, wolves are rarity 4, but penguins are rarity 2.
Yeah. Penguins are more common than owls. So,
So is it supposed to be usefulness? But it can't be, because like the way the traits. Anyway.
yeah, I don't plan to use this in my. Although I do like that there's a small mammal called a spotted cuscus, and I kind of
Yeah.
want to.
If you just want a list of names of animals, we could look at these pages.
Tragopan pheasant. Charax. Ooh, Mechanitis mimic. Some of these butterfly names.
88 butterfly? What?
Yeah, but that's chapter 2. It's weird because it's not really a character creation chapter. It's just kind of like, let's spend some time talking about the animal affinities from a variety of perspectives, but not actually give you constructive material to use for building a character.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're on to chapter 3.
Yep. Okay, just say all the art between chapters. It's just sketches
Yeah.
that are hard to make out. Stop bringing it up.
We open with a quote from Jeremiah of Greymere Glen, who we saw in Freeholds and Hidden Glens way back in first edition. I can't remember if he was the Unseelie twin, but he sounds like it from his quote here.
Okay, I don't know what is this chapter about.
Well, it's entitled Love, Lies, and Losses, and we're going to hear about Pooka-ese in this chapter, which is the lies.
Yep.
We're going to hear about their emotions for some reason, which is the losses, and then we're going to hear about some awkward, sexy stuff, which is the love.
Yeah. At one part, like, I think it's trying to sound like all like deep and how sad and upset they are, so they have one of the headings being "Bob bark honk howl cow cockadoodle doo."
Yes. Well, that's how they deal with the emotions inside them. Yeah, so there's this like entire opening passage about how bitter the Pooka are, how much pain they're in. And they keep using the clown as a metaphor, like, oh, clowns use their happy-go-lucky mask to disguise all of the suffering they feel inside. And again, I'm not against a Pooka having that as their guiding principle, but to assign this to the entire kith is like, ugh. So then their emotions for dealing with that are denial, bravado, irresponsibility, deviance, cruelty, and suicidal heroics.
Yeah, those are the main character concepts for a Pooka.
Yeah, because they're all just raw nerves, basically.
And then we get to their social dynamics.
There's a really good, just blatant lie at the start of that section, which is the social interactions of Pooka are no different from anyone else's.
Yep.
Bald-faced lie. Love it.
Well, they then go into how they're different from everyone else.
Exactly.
So.
Huzzah! So, as walking ids, because that's what this book wants us to believe that they are, certain Pooka desperately gravitate towards packs, and certain other Pooka are solitary, despite everything the opening of this section insisted upon. Like, they're like, they have friends, they love, they band together. It's like...
Well, it does say the solitary ones still are human enough to have friends anyway.
I guess they basically fill the niche of Ishu or Slua, but they're cuter?
And some of them like to travel. That's cool. I'm okay with, like, Pooka being not quite as travel-y as Ishu, but more travel-y than most other kiths. Like,
yeah,
that actually kind of works for me.
Especially if they're like a migratory animal. That makes sense. And for the packs part, the leaders section where they say that when they gravitate towards packs, they're either leaders or followers. The leaders part It was actually kind of interesting as an explanation for why they do their jester or like speak truth to power role so well. They challenge their leaders, and if the leader can't hold the pack together, then another Pooka is willing to step up or whatever. So I liked that they don't just needle the nobles because they can or they want to. They do it to keep them sharp, essentially.
To make sure they're the ones who should be the nobles.
Exactly, yeah. Trolls have some of that too, but more fun with Pooka.
You're talking about creepy stuff about love later, but there's some of that here with the Watcher.
I like to watch. For some Pooka, this is their mantra. Unfortunately, it doesn't always have the sexy connotation one would like.
This broke me, like Jeremy Bearimy broke me. But then they're just getting into like a lot of art has pictures of animals looking at stuff.
Right. Therefore, here we finally get some information about empathy, but it almost seems to suggest that the justification for their skill at empathy is because they have mutual pain with the people that they're being empathetic to, and I'm just not into that.
Well, it does have the justification people also say of everyone knows how Changeling Society discounts words of Pooka. Many changelings think, I have to tell someone, I'll tell the Pooka. If he does betray my secret, no one will believe him. And then we get into, I would argue, the most useful part of this book.
One of.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely one of the useful parts, but I think for a lot of people I know who like are interested in Pooka or want to portray Pooka or are a storyteller and has to Pooka NBC, this actually helps me get my head around how to actually play a Pooka better.
Yeah. Although that really meta philosophical treatise that opened the section on page 40.
Yeah.
It's like, are Pooka doing more than telling lies? Are they actually living the lie? I'm like, whoa, slow down, book.
Yep.
Didn't need a whole faux conspiracy theory for this. So
I think that's a legit psychological condition where you think that your entire personality is made up and you're worried about that.
For sure. So for Pooka-ese, I think it's good to remember that the frailty is structured around an inability to tell the whole truth. It's not that they can never tell any truth at all. It's that they can't just tell the truth by itself on its own.
And they also can't lie in a super obvious way where everyone would know exactly what they mean all the time. You can't just do opposite speak all the time. Yeah.
So I don't know that we need to go into super detail on each of these, but the options that are provided include enigmas, also known as answering questions with more questions, evasions, just changing the subject until they stop trying to get the truth out of you, stalling, again, until they stop trying to get the truth out of you, lickspittles, flattery rather than answers, lawyering, picking apart what the other person says so that they almost forget what they were asking you in the first place, scandals, blackmailing people until they leave you alone, and I think that's all of them, right?
They have like fairy tales and devil's advocate.
Yeah, which are more like discursive, like less responses to questions and more just general ways of communicating.
And this is all based around this framing story or something, or this concept of there's a she-lore who's like, who stole my cloak? Asks the Pooka, and it just goes downhill from there.
Yes.
But
so yeah, fairy tales, devil's advocate, question-based therapy. I think actually Pooka would be pretty good therapists asking questions. So the emergency section is useful because it points out that commands and requests are perfectly straightforward. You don't need to obfuscate the truth or anything when you're telling someone, come with me or leave me alone. There's also like various grammatical moods in different languages that you can play with. So rather than just the indicative mood, like this is the way things are, etc., you can use the subjunctive mood and say, would it were the case that such and such? I think that would qualify as not quite telling the whole truth.
Yep. But I do like it goes through, it's not just the literal thing that you're saying.
Right.
You should also make it so it's not completely simple and straightforward and everyone will just understand what the actual truth of the matter is from everything you're saying.
Yeah. Put some effort in.
Like, I think if you're really doing that too much, like, okay, maybe you need to make that willpower roll, or let's take back what you said, right?
Yeah. So, and here's the bit with Pooka taking oaths very seriously. Because the dreaming lifts all restrictions on them for lying when they pronounce the words of the oath.
Which is good, because I don't know what I'd do if that wasn't possible. That would be...
Yeah. All right, so then we've got 4 pages that we have to decide how to...
This
is the love section.
This bugged me less than actually some later bits they talk when they talk about this topic. But
I don't know where we're setting the bar, but
I mean, on the realm of like House Fiona and Kithbook Seder,
all right.
this isn't that bad.
This gets the bronze medal for ick.
There's actually some creepier stuff later we can get into.
We don't have to.
No.
Yeah, suffice to say, it's very 90s.
Mm-hmm.
There's some bizarre language choices, like
It's actually very similar to like a 90s sitcoms
right,
or like guy movies take on sex. Like it's
or like a very special episode.
I saw it as more as like written by the 20-something-year-old guy on the
Maybe, yeah.
in that Dude Where's My Car kind of movie or something.
There's something about Pooka.
Yeah.
So here's this one sentence specifically talking about the Pooka. They hold that anyone who preaches a banal philosophy in which sex or love is bad when it strays from the standard missionary position between alter-married spouses is full of shit. I'm like, okay, I'm not against that in principle. It was just kind of came out of nowhere. I feel like a lot of this text could have been repurposed from Kithbook-ese drafts.
Mm-hmm. Should have been in what's in Kithbook-ese than what we actually got, I think.
I think there's a lot more in here than in Kithbook-ese too,
Yeah.
on the subject, which is interesting. There's some deeply binaristic stuff like the roles of the sexes and the Pooka homosexual.
Again, 1999.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It seems very proud of its own hipness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it circles back to explain in detail Pooka reproduction, because we needed to know.
Hey, if you're pregnant, what does that mean for your Pooka? That
I suppose.
I'm not opposed to that, actually. But also, Pooka don't lay eggs. That's good to know.
I did like the plumage sidebar. I thought that was amusing. But yeah, it's here if you want it.
Yeah, and then we get a picture. I said I wouldn't mention it, but this picture is actually legible. Like you can actually see the inking. Doesn't look like pencil sketch.
They could afford an inked one.
Yep.
Yes, as we move into chapter 4.
Mm-hmm.
This, I think, is actually the most useful chapter. I mean, the Pooka-ese section is useful, but this entire chapter, I think, was pretty solid. So we go through the Childling, Wilder, and Elder years. Again, I think still reasonable to port into C20 as like following the actual ages rather than the seemings.
But also a bit of how long you've been. There's like 3 bits in C20. There's like your seeming, there's your age, and there's how long you've known you're a Pooka.
Yeah.
So like even a 10-year-old who's been aware of their Pooka for 4 years has some things up on a 40-year-old who just went through the chrysalis. But
yeah. And it's all kind of mixed together here, but I think all of it is still extractable and usable across those 3 divisions. So young Pooka stick close to their families, whether their birth families or otherwise. They ask a lot of questions. The Seelie ones are affectionate, the Unseelie ones are predatorial, and they are protected or mentored by their elders. And there's a really great sidebar on mentors. I actually thought this was one of the strongest parts of the book.
The mentoring, a lot of it seems to be how to actually move around in your animal form without it causing problems.
Yeah.
Or how to use your animal form without problems.
And ideally having a mentor with the same or similar animal affinity.
Yeah, and they go really far to make sure it's the same animal affinity if they can possibly.
Yeah. So then they get to their adolescence, where they learn to survive in all 3 of her kingdoms, the Fae, the Mortal, and the Animal. I kind of liked that. Mm-hmm. I didn't need to get back into the mating instincts part, but I guess that's a thing that happens.
Yep.
And overall, they seem to cleave pretty closely to the code of their respective courts. So the Seelie ones are pretty Seelie, the Unseelie ones are pretty Unseelie. So that's, you know.
Yeah, this whole thing of Seelie and Unseelie is it's pretty common in Changeling books. I don't know if I like that take on it, but whatever.
Yeah, nothing very surprising about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Elders, they're kind of busybodies who embrace routine more. I like that they keep getting compared to grandparents because as much as people point to like Bog and Grumps as the grandparent analogs, I think there's plenty of Pooka grandparents out there too.
Mm-hmm.
They also tend to show their territorialism and assert their dominance more because they're the elders. But then eventually they reach their latter stages of life. The Seelie tend to care for their kithmates even after their undoing, which is very rare, and I guess kind of goes against the C20 statements about once changelings are undone, other changelings are like, oh, stay away from them.
Yeah, but although any general trend like that of all changelings, I can't believe all changelings behave the same way. That's not.
If there's an exception, it's the Pooka.
Yep.
The Unseelie just put them out to pasture, so. But in either case, untimely death provokes revenge from the rest of the Kith.
And then marking territory, which is a lot less gross than you might think from the title.
A wolf Pooka of Toronto.
Yeah.
Huzzah.
Catalina. Should have been a coyote Pooka, but anyway.
She's from up province.
Yeah. Toronto actually has this like a huge coyote problem, so it's.
Oh. Well, she's from Rainy River. She just came down for.
Okay.
So the Seelie. They're leaders or followers, which we've already seen that distinction, but okay.
Yeah, we get some repeats along this part.
Yeah, there's a lot of repetition.
Love. And this is all written by one person, apparently. So.
Yeah. So the Seelie use conventional methods to protect nature. The code is tilted towards the pack overall, I would say, especially when it comes to the love piece. So it says, when a Pooka considers the concept of love, his first thought is always for his pack. It's like, okay. And then I don't understand why it's so fixated on like Pooka troll romance, but I guess Pooka break a lot of troll hearts? I don't know.
Yeah.
When it comes to beauty, they point to nature. When it comes to debts, they point to revenge and reciprocation.
I just realized, trolls, I guess, are a little bit animal-like. Maybe that's what.
I guess so.
Yeah, and I like that they highlight an eye for an eye, a tooth for the tooth, gift for a gift as the Seelie code.
Yes. Revenge as well as reciprocation comes naturally to them. Almost too naturally. Okay. So then the Unseelie court has less static packs and roles. They're more mutable. And the code is tilted towards fulfilling desire out of rage.
Yeah.
They don't feel sad for the world's devastation.
They feel angry.
This anger has developed into an inferno in their souls. They want mortals to be afraid. And like, all right, yeah, there's like the wild hunt and everything, and Pooka certainly can ravage left and right, but
again, so focused on the being werewolves.
Yeah. That being said, my favorite throwaway line in this section is the one about flesh-eating mutants in the dreaming because the Unseelie create nightmares of what they want to stamp out. I don't know if I agree with that, but where are my flesh-eating chimera? So there's that. Honor relates directly to the pack, which I feel like that's true for both Seelie and Unseelie.
I'm also confused why they have that there with honor specifically. I'm like,
right.
We should say loyalty because like honor is it's a lie, right?
Well, it says they don't call this honor. It's simply a matter of survival. But
that's Pooka-ese. There we go. It covers up all sins, right?
Yeah. There's a note that the truly lone Pooka is a rare creature indeed, which makes more sense to me than when they were talking about how many Pooka were solitary earlier. So,
Shadow Court Pooka.
Yeah. It is interesting to say that Pooka can innately keep secrets because they can't repeat it accurately, even if they want to, unless they spend willpower or whatever. And then they're often overlooked, so they make good spies, as we said. I guess I'm fine with Shadow Court Pooka. But then there's the beasties, and they fill a different niche.
That's something I need rules for forms on. But
yeah.
I just pulled out my copy of the various changing breeds, Werewolf 20, and just went, you get these powers. Here you go.
Excellent.
Based on a character draw.
So then we get into the societies.
I love the names of the societies.
The names are great. I think the societies are fine. It's just that...
Yes. The names are the best part of them.
But they also just kind of feel like they were created separately from the rest of this book and just kind of dropped in.
I feel like they came up with some names and then they created some.
Yeah.
It's like the powerful purveyors of I can't say that.
Pestilential pranks.
Yeah.
The justice system for the Kith.
My favorite is the Pooka Watchers.
I love that one.
It's like, apparently there's a bunch of people studying Pooka, which you learn. Actually, the framing mechanism of this book is that. The history section.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then there's other Pooka who don't like the non-Pooka studying Pooka, so they watch the Pooka. They watch the people watching Pooka, and then they start doing weird stuff and mess with them.
I mean, they're just messing with the data. That's, again, a time-honored tradition.
It's like freaking the mundanes, but the mundanes are she.
And also anthropology researchers.
Yep.
Then the uncrowned. These are Pooka who feel they have every right to hold as many positions of leadership and freeholds as any other Kith.
But they don't care about the title background.
No. They're mostly just Unseelie who want things. But it says, there's a note that They can take possession of a freehold and balefire without any immediate repercussions. What? Thereby hangs a tale.
Hmm.
I'd like to know more about that.
The salvage crew, because they're worried about what happens if you're a certain affinity and the animal for that goes extinct. The puka don't tend to last much longer past that point, so let's rescue those animals by taking them to the dreaming. Nothing can go wrong with that.
Yeah.
So they'll take, like, oh, there's peregrine falcons. Let's take a bunch of peregrine falcons and take them to the dreaming or whatever.
Yeah. The political animals like to mess with politics, create political chaos. And then the renunciate faction, who advocate extreme war prevention and or abandoning the autumn world.
This one felt too real to me, with like a bunch of people I know trying. It's like, oh, there's a serious problem. Let's deal with it. Oh my goodness, it's hurting cats. They're not agreeing on anything, and they're a bunch of them are saying very extreme things you probably don't want them to agree on. And yeah,
Yeah, it's very over the top. Very dramatic.
and then their opinions on others. They like boggins.
They also exploit boggins, to be fair.
Yeah, they get along with the issue.
Fun with competitive tricks and storytelling.
They hate knockers because they're of the weaver.
Yeah, as representatives of Pooka and Knocker Kiths, I say we bury the hatchet once and for all.
Yep.
They have a volatile relationship with Redcaps, but the Unseelie have grudging respect.
Yeah, there's been this rivalry between Redcaps and Pooka that's gone throughout that through line throughout all of Changeling. But
Yes.
they have a weird relationship with satyrs.
Yeah.
They're like really like satyrs, and satyrs are like, please go away.
Yeah, and like the whole like Unseelie are attracted to the point of assault. I didn't really need that.
No.
The she, very variable. Admiration mixed with paranoia.
The Slua, like, I don't know what to do about Slua. They're just a non-category.
Except for Spider Pooka.
Yep.
And then the trolls, it's kind of the same as satyrs, except with honor instead of love/lust.
Yep.
So Pooka admire them. Trolls are like, ugh.
I bet you like the Nunnehi and the Galleon section.
Oh my god. I'm just gonna say, I had really hoped we were moving past the earlier depictions of the Nunnehi, but I don't know.
It's just past some of the earliest ones. That's the scary thing.
Yeah, the Nunnehi section just, yeah.
And then the Selkies, where it's like,
Well, they're befuddled by but friendly with the Selkies.
mm-hmm.
And then of course the Inanimate, they're like, must protect.
Yeah, the Nanime one actually read a lot like the Nunnehi one, but it's less offensive because the Nanime aren't a
Right.
proxy for a real world culture. But
yeah, and the other thing is, the Pooka are repeatedly kind of positioned as these protectors or even avengers at some point, but I haven't really seen anything about them as a kith structurally, or nothing that indicates to me that they would be effective in any of those roles.
Okay, do you know how this reads to me? Like, okay, you have to take this position, this thesis on an essay topic.
Right.
Like, I don't agree with this thesis at all. Okay.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. The SAT version of Kithbook Pooka. Prodigals, they avoid vampires. They share rage with the Garou, but not like capital R rage. They don't actually. That would be great, though. That would be a merit for Pooka to have a rage stat.
Yeah, it's like almost as good as Wayfair too.
They apparently call mages weirders, which is a term we've never seen before or since.
Yes, but I like that.
And then wraiths is no opinion, really.
Mm-hmm. And humans, love-hate relationship.
So it's a mishmash of words that, again, tells me very little about the humans that's unique to the Pooka, except for hammering even more on this single note about their nature preservation angle.
Yeah, well, both the birthrights and frailties of Pooka are totally based around preserving nature. So
yeah. In short, the Pooka don't know what to think of or do about humans. Again, just top tier lie there.
And this brings us to Chapter 5, Animal Magnetism.
Dum dum dum.
This is the one that squicked me, this chapter.
Some of them were squicky, or squickier than others, at least.
Well, when you look at, especially when you look at like the ages and how it's described and what they, and also they made the Sealy Peacock Pooka that's like a combination personality-wise of like Liberace and
Paul Lind.
Well, they described him also as like Liberace and what's his name?
Elton John?
Elton John, yeah. Who's straight. Or maybe straight.
Well, bisexual.
Maybe. Oh, is he bisexual?
I'm just guessing.
Okay, I hope so.
Then we get Slick, who's kind of a proto-Pisky, chameleon Pooka, but has the whole thing about fitting in wherever she goes, changing her accent, disguising herself, androgynous form. And it's like, yeah.
And then they have Acris Pristis, which I think is the first trans man in Changeling.
I think so, or at least the first one who's
Yeah.
specified to be such.
And some of the wording was like awkward, but again, it's 1999, so I don't know how to.
Yeah, I mean, we go back to that question of representation. Is bad representation better than no representation?
And this isn't even particular. If it was just reworded, it wouldn't have been so bad.
Yeah.
So.
We should also point out that each of these write-ups specifies, with one exception, the type of Pooka-ese that these characters all speak. So Lord Thierry Alain Chevalier, the Peacock Pooka, does a teasing wink-wink style with lots of distraction and diversion thrown in. Slick is, because they change identity so frequently, it says she, but I think of them as non-binary, frankly. Her entire self becomes a lie. So she develops extensive histories for each of her aliases and shares them to give credence to her false identity. So it's like her identity itself is the lie that she's telling. And Osiris Pristis just grumbles. So I like that as an option. Like, if you don't know how to do your Pooka-ese, just go.
Yeah, Mistress Merry Widow, I like more if she wasn't like 18 or 19.
She's the dominatrix one, yes?
Yeah, given her how long she's supposed to be. Anyway.
Her Pooka-ese is fantasies. Rene Devereaux, who's a Cajun alligator/alligator protector.
That just reminded me of the character from the Ninja Turtles cartoon, but
they actually don't say what his Pooka-ese is. Unacceptable.
Yeah. And Moses Coyote Delgado.
Yeah, this was the quick one for me.
Yeah.
Essentially a aging hippie cult leader who believes in child marriage.
Yeah, I mean, at least they didn't present him as anything but a villain, but still.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
They could have cut back a bit and still made him creepy enough to fit.
It is also the case that these are all substantially longer than a lot of the other Kithbook.
This one's super long, the Delgado one.
Yeah. Then Jezebel, who's the butterfly Pooka. I really like that she had a second chrysalis.
Yeah, that was a neat idea. A literal chrysalis for your butterfly Pooka.
All the she made fun of her, and now she's their heartbreaker because she's so pretty with wings.
She's a pretty 14-year-old. But besides that, she's...
Wait, is she? I actually missed that.
Well, when she became...
Yeah, she's a wilder,
Yeah. You know, maybe they could have fixed things by changing the ages of... Although teenagers do get up to stuff, so it's like...
They do, but she could also be 22, you know?
Yeah.
That's the difficulty.
Yeah, I think it's more the way they presented it. Like, it's not like she was just heartbreaking the other new wilders.
Yeah. Then Coca Jones, an unseelie polar bear.
This is like, if you're like, you wanted to play a red cap, but you told you had to play a Pooka.
Yes. And he's also a drug runner, because why not?
And abusive to his family and all sorts of...
Yeah. But he's another mumbler.
Why don't I care?
Yeah, he also asks gruff questions. Out of all of these, I think the first two are my favorites, and Jezebel's okay.
Yeah. I don't have a favorite exactly, because they're all like something about them that makes me... Anyway,
yeah. But as we pointed out before, though, it's not like you're obligated to use any of these in your game. I certainly never have.
Yep. Some of them I could use in my game as like NPCs. And then we have the Animal Kingdom. It's the the character templates. The pet one's super sad.
Yeah.
So that was like, you're like childling, like young childling, I think, locked in a closet, turned into a puppy. Your mom comes and then's like, oh, get out of here, and like kicks out the puppy. And now you're like wandering the streets and stuff. Like, oh my goodness. That's...
Yeah, it was kind of melodramatic for me. The prince. I thought the prince was okay, I guess.
Yep. The philanthropist. I thought she should have an extra dot of resources, but other than that.
Yeah, she's unimaginably wealthy, and yet she only has
Yeah.
4 dogs.
Yeah, the philanthropist, like, this is where I'm arguing these are good for NPCs. Like, she could work as an NPC in a game somehow, but less so
Yeah.
as a PC.
Again, really cramming the text in for these as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are some really elaborately developed Kithbook templates.
The pesky varmint.
I like this one, except that it's so loaded with 90s dare rhetoric.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you never came down from the high the first time you tried these drugs.
That bit, when I read that, I'm just like, what the... Okay, for the world direction to make sense, I'm not saying for your games, but the books themselves, if you assume they're set in prime time thriller TV show kind of things, like NCIS or something.
Or tabloid.
Yeah, it all makes a lot more sense. But
yeah. There's The Predator, which feels really one-dimensional to me, and I'm, as the child of a social worker, I'm really not here for the social services hate, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to deny that there are negatives to the social services system and bad situations, but I get really annoyed when all of it is painted with that brush.
Well, it's generally also a structural issue, I think. Rather than...
That too. But yeah, this kind of leans very hard into those tropes and doesn't result in an interesting character, frankly.
No.
But I liked the Punisher. He's probably my favorite, actually. He's like the Punisher crossed with Zorro. I'm all about that. And a Panther Pooka.
Yep. And then we get Chapter 7. Quirks and Baubles, starting with merits and flaws. So many merits and flaws.
There really are. Some of which found their way into C20, I believe. Like Good Listener, I'm pretty sure. Maybe Calming Presence. And some of them are generally useful. Like, I think the merits overall are...
I found Called Friends hilarious, especially with the idea of it being a chicken. Like, if you're Chicken Pooka and you start going like, bark, 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 and then like all these chickens come and it's like you're playing Zelda.
Well, but you have to be careful how you do that, because if you recall, that's how Pooka expressed their denial, bravado, etc. So.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like the Good Listener, the Loud Voice, and the Calming Presence are all kind of broadly applicable. The Animal Speech and the Call to Friends, it's kind of like animalism from Vampire, the first couple of powers. The Intimidation merit is not good.
It's just the birthright for Redcaps.
But it's also a 3-point merit for -2 difficulty on rolls for a single ability, which is just not great. Whole Cloth is like...
It's the right of whatever for werewolves, but...
Yeah.
I just have this as... That's how it works for Pookas. I don't know why I'd do it otherwise. I don't want naked player characters showing up all the time.
Well, you also have a LARP background, so you have to think more carefully about these
No,
things.
but also just in the game, it's like, why is that fun? Like, it's...
Yeah. We have Venomous Attack, which is the Venom rules. The physical abnormality, I mean, I like it. I like that, oh, yeah, if your animal form has this particular gift, it would be cool if that transferred into your Fey seeming. And we get plenty of evidence that a Pooka's Fey mean reflects their animal nature to some extent. But again, there's no guidelines to that. It's just as the storyteller figures it out.
Yeah, this should just... It's like, fine, make up your own merits. It should have just said that. Or use other merits as appropriate. And, yeah. Because Venomous Attack, right there, 5-point merit.
With actual mechanics, though.
Yeah. They even say Venomous Bite as a 3 to 4 point example.
Well, in the earlier Venom sidebar, they specify that a Venomous Bite at that level should not have the full Venom rules that come with Venomous Attack. So I guess that's like Platypus. Well, that's a spur rather than a bite, but minor Venom. I don't know. Then we get some flaws.
The first one is just slip-seeming, so like...
True. Pack mentality, natural urge. Like, a lot of these, again, echoing Vampire, they seem like gangrel things, and they're more for flavor than mechanical impact, and overall they're kind of uneven. Environmental need, which is basically the Samisi flaw, it's fine. Animal amnesia, I did think was actually intriguing. Difficult to navigate in-game, but as a character attribute. That might be good for like a solo game, but probably not for a group.
I'm just picturing like there's like this dog who's just like scratching at the same detailed notes for themselves, but still in Pooka-ese. Then they come back like, what?
Yeah. And then the last two are just, I don't even know how I would integrate these into a game.
You get a 4-point flaw by just staying in your animal form most of the time. Okay.
Makes it very difficult to do anything else with other changelings, though. And then hibernation, it's like...
So you say it makes it hard to... I'm just picturing like a rabbit wearing a little waistcoat. Then he can't speak. Yeah, like I said.
I suppose, yeah. Maybe in a full Pooka game, you can
Mhm.
make it work more easily.
Yep. Magical crumbs, level 1 treasure. That was kind of neat.
Oh, yeah. The treasures I quite like. And I like that it acknowledges that the Pooka won't always have clothes or pockets or hands to carry these. So, yeah, the magical crumbs. Ariadne's croutons is how I think of them.
Cat boots is like, oh, this is kind of cool, except it only works against the enchanted. You disappear, but only to those who are enchanted. Or the fae or whatever.
They probably still look like excellent boots to mortals, though.
Yep.
The dog tags, I was a little confused because it's like you scry through them, but do you then give them to other people? They could keep track of those they loved. So yeah, you make a dog tag, give it to somebody you want to keep an eye on, and it allows you to scry through it.
Oh, okay.
Each tag has the name and address of the original creator upon it, perhaps explaining why they have endured for so long. I don't think that does, actually.
No, perhaps it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Balthazar's bracelets.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, gives you armor, basically.
Armor tattoos in all forms.
Cleopatra's wings. That one was weird to me.
But it gives you flight. So
Hey, in C20 rules, it'd be a level 4 treasure.
yeah, a lot of these are just kind of cantrip treasures, which makes them easily portable, but then the levels are occasionally a little bit strange.
Yep. And Osiris's flail.
Repository of all knowledge.
And we get a Pooka character sheet, which actually seems like it has animal affinity.
I think they figured out that the previous ones had problems.
Yeah, I don't see any weird skills that shouldn't be there or knowledges.
Even in the deeper parts, like even in the later pages, there's stuff like animal form stats and
you just feel bad because you're like, somebody's playing a Slua or a Satyr and they get Gematria, but in color, and you're like black and white.
It's a mixed bag for everybody.
Is there any interesting ads in your copy?
Oh, well. So the last page in the physical copy, because Art House was just kind of throwing together whatever they could, I guess, there is a full page treatise about the return of Phil Brucato to the World of Darkness writing staff. And he talks about Mage the Sorcerer's Crusade a lot, and how Infernalism Path of Screams is coming out. And it's a choice. I'll put it on the show notes or something. I'll put it in the Discord for all to see. So
wait, Phil Brucato left and then came back before?
I suppose he took a break of some kind, or I'm not sure.
Anyway, my overall thoughts are, I wouldn't break the bank to get this book, but like the Pooka-ese chapter and a few other things are pretty useful, but I wouldn't also use a lot of this.
I'll admit that I broke the bank to get this one.
Yes.
A while ago.
Okay. If you want the complete collection, this was like the famous book for how much it cost.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, this was the one that for years I did not have in hard copy just because.
Now you can get print on demand from drive-through for the same prices.
No, I still got the original.
Yeah, but you could. If you're a completionist collector or something, sure. But like,
I didn't pay triple digits for it. So.
That is not for the contents of this book. There's some useful things, and there's some things I would just not use. And I don't know how many pages worth of useful there is, but
22 out of 96.
Useful even after listening to the episode.
Yeah, 18 out
of
96.
Yes.
There are moments of glory. Like, I don't want to deny that, but there's also moments of,
I mean, if you want to have a Pooka historian and you want them to just recite exactly what's in this history chapter, that could work in your game.
Or if you want to have a Pooka who believes they're an ancient Egyptian god, but also a werewolf who wants to yiff all the time, then that's here for you too.
Yep.
And for better or for worse, we're stuck with it. This is canon.
You say that. It didn't get brought into C20, some of the
That's
rules.
True, yeah. Well, bits of it, maybe. But that's the thing, is when you have a single author book like this, if they make choices that not everybody agrees with, you're like, golden rule.
I think I've been finding more of that as we're going through the later second edition. There's these, wait a second, are you sure you want to go in that direction? Or not always bad, it's just, this is kind of late. Like, you're completely changing what the Pooka are. What are you doing?
Right. I keep thinking back in my mind to Rasputin from The Immortal Eyes, series,
Mm-hmm.
the trilogy. And for all of his thinness as a character, he was still so much more complex and interesting as a Pooka, just that side of his nature, than a lot of what this book kind of outlines.
Mm-hmm.
Even though notoriously his Pooka-ese was simply saying the opposite, which is pretty basic, he had like a fleshed out three-dimensional backstory, and he had emotions, and he was grounded in humanity and not obsessed with nature being destroyed all the time. I have no problem with a Pooka environmentalist, but I don't want all of them to be enraged environmentalists, because we already have a game for that. So
Yep.
I would have liked to see robust mechanics for animal forms. I would have liked to see more about dream burrows.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to see more variety about their roles in Kithane society. But as varied as their forms are, their animal forms, which this book pushes, the Pooka themselves, as they're represented here, they're just expressions of the same ideas over and over. And
Mm-hmm.
that's so... I feel disappointed. There's parts that I love, but overall...
Yep. Do we want to do the listener questions now?
Yeah, let's cleanse our palate with some listener feedback.
So, Storyteller asks, besides the usage of rare animal merit, what sort of balancing mechanisms do you use for different animal forms?
Well, the book certainly doesn't help with advice in that direction.
It has advice, it's just not.
I said helpful advice.
Yeah. So, what do you use in your games?
I don't think I've ever had enough people playing Pooka to really like need to care about it too much, but I would tell players, shuffle around your attribute dots in a way that makes sense. Shuffle around ability dots in a way that makes sense. And for whatever like freebies left over you have, if you're like, oh, there's no way that I'm going to get all 10 of my physical dots into this mouse form, then I will either come up with some kind of bonus, like 10 dots of stealth, or some merit that you temporarily have, just because I want the animal form to be as useful in and of itself. I want them to have good reason to change into it. But yeah, a more robust system would be really nice.
Yeah. For me, I don't use the rare animal merit. I would change the physical attributes and basic abilities based on if we have a template that seems reasonable somewhere for that animal. I wouldn't change the health levels though. And I mean, if you're particularly dexterous human, maybe you're particularly dexterous for a cat, but that's about as far as I go. I'm not going to try to balance it, because it's like, how do you balance a hawk and a mouse and a dolphin? Like, I can't balance that. That's
with an intricate scale.
And it would depend on where you are and like what. It's like, okay, the raccoon, that's broken because it's like in a city and can do things like way more broken than a rhinoceros, unless you're in a setting where it's okay to be a rhinoceros. And
zoo combat.
Yeah, figure out the stats, and that's your character stats in your animal form. And then yeah, if you want to have stuff in your animal, in your Fey main or something, that's merits and flaws territory.
Luna Andromeda Vebe asks, do you think Pooka are the definitive furry kith? This book certainly wants them to be. This book seems to think so.
Except it doesn't. It didn't read much like furries, I know. They're not all big on environmentalism to this degree.
I don't know. The love section.
I know a number of ace furries. It's not.
Well, that too. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Elleris asks, the Uncrowned struck me as an attempt to explain how a Pooka might broaden their political aspirations beyond court jester. Given that every changeling is seemingly aware of the Pooka frailty, if not actually aware of how it works, how would you portray and utilize a Pooka who feels that they're destined for the nobility? I think in Unseelie 1, I would have them making capricious decrees that nobody can predict and kind of ruling through the terror of that. And then the Seelie, really the two courtier characters, the Peacock Pooka and Jezebel the Butterfly, I think are good examples in that direction. Elegant hyperbole for everything and everyone at all times. That's my take.
We have an implied question, wondering if you're doing every episode in Pooka-ese.
Oh, that is quite an implied question, isn't it?
What's the plural form of Pooka?
Pooka. I mean, at least in the books. I don't recall ever seeing Pookas anywhere, and it sounds completely wrong to me. In the Discord, we had a number of linguistic suggestions.
Yep. Yeah, how do you handle the frailty? Well, the book actually does handle that pretty well, actually. That's pretty good.
Yes.
Oh, here's the most important question. Describe the fate of the world. Each Pooka is based on a type of animal. So which animal is Pooka-gar based on?
All of them, naturally.
So yeah, you can find us at changelingthepodcast.com. You can send us an email, podcast@changelingthepodcast.com. You can send us a toot, including if you're a elephant puka. There's no mastodon puka anymore, unfortunately, but it is on Mastodon.
Maybe there's one hiding in a dream burrow somewhere.
Yeah, maybe look at Federated. Changelingpod at dice.camp. You can go on Facebook for us because we are not a Canadian news site at Changeling the Podcast. You can go to our YouTube page.
Changeling the podcast.
And all the links will be in the show notes.
Even the ones we forgot.
Mm-hmm. And once again, I'm Josh.
The court order has me listed as Pooka.
What I want to know is, out of all the stories you told me, which ones were true and which ones weren't?
My dear Josh, they're all true.
Even the lies?
Especially the lies.
This episode has been sponsored by the most noble company of Pooka extraordinary worldwide, bringing madcap mayhem and melodious mischief to the dank dark world since time immemorial. No problem too small, no solution too huge, no Pooka too incapable of doing what must not needs be undone. Summon your friendly neighborhood Pooka today. Our show is also made possible through support from listeners like you. Please do consider leaving us a review on the podcast listening platform of your greatest convenience. You can also sign up for our Patreon at www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast and receive a shout-out at the end of each episode, like the following fine folks: Derek, Torkidus, Oreo, Razgaboos, Sandjigger, Sija, Terry Robinson, and Tricerabeth. Until next time, don't do anything we wouldn't do, or that we would do, or, do whatever. Live your own lives. How about that? But regardless, keep on dreaming.